Today marks 80 years since German pastor, theologian, and activist Dietrich Bonhoeffer was killed by the Nazi Party. Bonhoeffer was born in 1906, one of 8 kids. He had a twin sister who eventually married a Jewish man and ended up having to flee Germany. But Bonhoeffer was only 8 when World War I started, and his brother, Walter, was killed in action when he was 12. And soon after that, he decides that he wants to become a theologian. And he begins to study. He was also actually a pretty good musician. He was a little bit of a child prodigy, but he decides that his calling is as a pastor. And so in 1930, he actually gets a sort of scholarship to be able to go study in New York at the Union Theological Seminary. And to be honest, he was like a little unimpressed with Americans. He said, we're just like a little loosey goosey. Germans, they're known for being a little serious. And he kind of thought like Americans, not so serious. But anyway, he goes to New York. And while he's there, he makes a friend and they go to church at Abyssinian Baptist Church, where Adam Clayton Powell is preaching a gospel of social justice. And when Bonhoeffer gets to see how Black people are worshiping and how they're doing so in the midst of a lot of oppression, he starts to begin to shift his focus. He also sees the movie All Quiet on the Western Front, which shows the horrors of war. And before those two experiences, he would have said, he was maybe a little bit more nationalistic as a German. He wanted to support his brother's decision to fight. But after his experience, he talks about how it helps him to realize that violence is never the answer. And so he does become a pacifist. In 1931, he returns to Germany. He gets actually a pretty prestigious job as a lecturer in theology at the University of Berlin. He's ordained that year at 25. And he's, again, like I said, he's a superstar. He's getting all these appointments and accolades. And this is all happening on the backdrop of a lot of tension and conflict in the German church. You remember that thing, the Protestant Reformation? Of course, that happened in Germany. And German churches have had, a little tension. The Lutherans, the Anabaptists, they were fighting. And so in this season, there starts to be the rise of these folks who call themselves the Deutsche Christians, German Christians. And in many ways, they're putting country before religion. And Bonhoeffer wants people to declare that Christ is first. And so they're ending up in this tension. And in 1931, the Nazis are elected. And in a radio address, Bonhoeffer warns that the Führer, the leader, that's what they called Hitler, could become the Wehrführer, which is the seducer, the person who leads people astray. And so from the very beginning, he warns people about the rise of Hitler. And he tries to rally folks, not just to oppose the Nazis, but he wants them to create a movement that is about the life and teachings of Jesus, that's about taking care of those who are most oppressed. He says, your yes to God requires your no to all injustice, to all evil, to all lies, to all oppression and violation of the weak and poor. He believes that it's about more than just opposing Hitler, but about giving a vision that really allows people to love one another and be with each other in a different way. And so he gets an appointment, and he could have stayed in Germany, but he decides that in 1933, he takes an assignment in London. He goes there. He's trying to build this international movement. And in 1935, after 2 years at that appointment, he could have gone back. He could have gone to India. He gets this prestigious opportunity to go study at the ashram with Mahatma Gandhi. But he, partially because of the critique of his good friend Karl Barth, decides, like, I can't leave my people. I have to go back. There's things going on there. As much as he would have loved to study with Gandhi, he instead goes back to Germany. And he's there. In 1937, he publishes a book, The Cost of Discipleship, in which he focuses on Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And it's in that book that he says, if you're serious about Jesus, if you're serious about love, you can't just show up on Sunday and then live your life. You have to be dedicated to justice. You have to be dedicated to spiritual focus. You have to lean all the way in. Now, I want to lift this up because I am really frustrated by, I don't know if that people didn't read his book. I don't know if they don't know the context, but I've seen folks using his words to promote things that I am very clear he would have been against. In fact, there are folks on the right who are saying that, like, and he's actually quoted in Project 2025. And so it's just really weird, not quoted, but like lifted up in Project 2025. And so I just want to make a clear statement about, and I hope, go ahead and read The Cost of Discipleship. I know not everyone's going to really do that, but I think it's a really important to name that as we look at the life of Bonhoeffer, we see that like the things he struggles with are the very things that we're struggling with. And the reality is we're not the only ones. There are people in Poland and Brazil and Germany and Israel and France and Venezuela all asking the question about what is the relationship between our call to God and justice? What is the relationship between having a country that we are committed to and the higher principles of moral principles that we aspire to? But I think the thing that Bonhoeffer really does say is that we should listen to people. We shouldn't attack people. We should be with people and show love to them. And we have to be clear about what our bottom lines are. We have to have an open heart, but a firm moral compass. And it kind of frustrates me to see him being used, because it is true that he is part of a plot to kill Hitler. And I think people use the fact that he was willing to go that far, but then they negate all the things that he said. So I don't know. I think if he could go back and see how that choice is being used by people to justify things he would clearly oppose, he might regret that choice. But either way, I want to lift this up because I think we are in a season where things are happening around us and we have a choice whether we are going to ignore them or hope that they go away, or whether we're going to say that we believe, whether it's for those of us who are Judeo-Christian or those of us who believe in the tenets of the Constitution, we have to decide whether or not, for instance, the notion we, the people, that we are in this together, that we are connected to each other, means something, or if we're going to allow ourselves to be divided. For those of us who are in Lent right now, walking towards this season where we celebrate the death and resurrection of Christ, we have to decide, what is more important? Are we followers of Jesus, or are we followers of America? Because sometimes those two things are not in alignment. And I believe we're in a season where that is true. I also want to specifically lift up those of us who are in the military. On April 20th, there will be a joint report from the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security, in which they will rule on whether or not President Trump is able to use martial law from the Insurgent Act. And then many of our armed forces will have to decide. I really hope it doesn't come to that. I hope the report says no. I hope the president doesn't choose to. But if it does, all of us will have to decide whether or not we side with our highest principles, or whether we just go along with what everyone else is doing or what we've been told to do, whether or not our fear will be greater than our love. I celebrate Dietrich Bonhoeffer because he chose love, and he paid a high price. On this day, he was hung for that choice. I hope you will learn more about him. But most importantly, I hope you will be inspired by him. I truly hope we don't end up in the place where we have to choose. Part of the reason I'm naming this now is that we should prepare our hearts and be really clear about who we are and what we believe and where we will stand. We should have an open heart that loves everyone, but also a firm conviction that stands steadfast against injustice. Rest in power, Dietrich Bonhoeffer.